Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video we have buffs and nerfs class tuning that is coming with the next weekly reset. So without further ado, let's get into it. After closely monitoring data on class performance as well as player feedback, we've developed the following adjustments to classes that are over and underperforming in group content and PvP. These changes will go into effect with scheduled weekly maintenance in each region. Up first, Demon Hunter. Sigil of Flame damage reduced by 10%. Now, this is the only part of this that is going to affect Vengeance as well as Havoc, but this is a damage nerf to both of the Demon Hunter specs, which I think a slight nerf to Vengeance damage is fine. That spec does do a lot of damage. And then, of course, Havoc as well, a huge overperformer in both Raid and Mythic Plus, so not surprised to see it targeted as well. Then there's some further things aimed at Havoc here. The damage of the summoned Fell Devastation from Collective Anguish. So again, this only affects Havoc. It doesn't affect the summoned I-Beam if you talent this on Vengeance, but it's been reduced by 10% for Havoc. Ragefire damage has been reduced to 30 from 35%. So this is a 16% Ragefire nerf, something like that. I think. I don't know. You know what? Let's see how our math is here. What 30 over 35? Yeah, so 14.3% or something nerf. I guess maybe it's 35 over 30 is the right way to do this. Yeah, 16. Depends on which way you want to think about it, right? Anyways, either way, a modest nerf to Ragefire there. And then a Fire Inside's chance to reset Immo Aura has been reduced to 25% from 30% as well. So this is actually going to make the rotation feel a little bit less reset-y too. So large nerfs here to Havoc's AoE in particular. The single target is also affected by these things. These things did affect their single target too, but more so the AoE profile of the spec is getting toned down again. Second time this has happened in the last few weeks. Probably will still be fine, but this likely takes it out of the super meta best M+ comps, maybe? Maybe not, I don't know. Evoker, I mean, it's still really durable, that's the thing. The spec still doesn't die, so... Anyways, Evoker, Devastation, Pyre increased by 15%, does not apply to PvP, and all spells and abilities by 3%, also not applying to PvP. So a buff to AoE mostly with the Pyre here, although, you know, do get a freebie when you press Dragon Rage. And then all spells and abilities by 3%, a pretty small number there. So a nice little buff to Dev, a spec that I actually think fits the fight profiles of Tindral and Fyrakk pretty well, so... you know, good news if you're doing, say, Mythic Progression on a Dev Evoker, because you're a holdout against the Augmentation Plague. And then Preservation. Resonating Sphere once again applies Echo to the first 5 allies it passes through, was 3. And they say, Resonating Sphere was recently reduced as part of a broad AoE healing reduction pass. After watching the change play out, we're not happy with the resulting gameplay, particularly in dungeons, where it doesn't cover your whole party. Makes sense to me. Preservoker, by the way, does do a bunch of damage in dungeons. So if there's ever dungeons where that's what you want and you've got a lot of really durable DPS, I think Prez could be a really solid choice. This also massively increases the healing in those dungeons, at least the quality of life of being that healer in those dungeons. Mage. Now, this is a big one. The Wizards have not been doing well this time around. Let's take a quick little look at the statistics on Warcraft logs. You can see the best performing mage spec is here in the bottom third of specs. And this is on damage all bosses on Mythic and all percentiles. If we bring this up to like 95th percentile, the situation does not improve either. So mage has been down rather bad. Worse. Look at all 3 of these rogue specs up here, just gapping the field as well. That's kind of wild. But yeah, okay, so Arcane Blast, 6% increased damage, and Arcane Missiles, 10% increased damage. So modest buffs here to Arcane. Those 2 buttons are much of their damage, but still only 2 abilities being buffed here. Fire Blast by 12%, Pyroblast by 5%, Fireball by 10%, Flame Strike by 12%, and Intensifying Flame now increases ignite damage by 25, was 15%. So large nerf or buffs to Fire. And then Frostbolt 15%, Ice Lance 12, Flurry 10, and Glacial Spike 6. So a little bit more of a single target focus for Frost, which I think probably makes some sense here. I think, you know, Frozen Orb and Blizzard and such. Probably not too much in need of these, but the single target definitely, I think, will appreciate it. Again, yeah, I mean, this is really good for Mage, especially for M+. Mage was already good in M+. If we look at Raider.io, and we take a look at the top groups, Frost Mage, Fire Mage, Frost Mage, Fire Mage, Fire Mage. Again, a lot of these are the same group, right? So it's kind of unfair to count it too much, but already a lot of mages up at the top of the IO leaderboards. And I suspect that will continue to be true, or perhaps become even more true as a result of these changes. Monk, Windwalker, developers notes. This is just right here alone. This is novel. Windwalker, developers notes. We continue to keep an eye on Windwalker damage and feel they need a second incremental improvement to their relative performance. This round of tuning focuses on payoff for successfully executing the bonus effects of the Mystic Heron's Disciple tier set, that's the current tier set, as well as increasing the damage of rotational cheese benders in Rising Sun Kick and Fists of Fury. Spinning Crane Kick 20%, Blackout Kick 10%, Rising Sun Kick 8%, Fist of Fury 8%, and those ones don't apply to PvP. Blackout Reinforcement up to 250 from 200, Glory of the Dawn 12%, and Dance of Chi-Ji increased to 300%. This is actually huge. I mean, Spinning Crane Kick's base damage is going up by 20%, and then Chi-Ji's multiplier is going up to 300%. So Chi-Ji empowered Spinning Crane Kicks are going to be doing like double damage compared to what they were doing this week. So this is large for the Windwalkers. Definitely a big set of buffs to the spec, much more than the little aura buffs that they've gotten recently. And I haven't played Windwalker much this tier, but these seem pretty well targeted to me as well. Definitely, my thought was that the Spinning Crane Kick side of the spec especially felt really weak before, so it's good to see that being targeted. Mistweaver. Unison now heals a second injured ally for 35%, down from 50%. And Enveloping Breath's healing has been reduced by 10%, and Essence Font's healing has been reduced by 8%. So Mistweaver was an outlier. If we look at the top keys of the season, not many of them included Mistweavers yet, because not a lot of people had them, but you could see already, like, Ambition had Ellesmere on the Mistweaver. Vela has been pushing on it, and there's started to be some of them in these keys. And if we look at Mythic stats, we can see the percentage of Mistweavers in the top 2,000 runs has been ramping up as well, despite this being a spec that is very historically underrepresented in all content, but especially in high-end PvE. So I think that some nerfs here are probably fair for M+. They're definitely fair for Raid. In the Raid side of things, Mistweaver has been a mainstay of the healing comp this tier, and has felt pretty much mandatory. The way they function on the later Mythic bosses as well has just been extremely valuable. And obviously it's good that Mistweaver has a place in Raid, right? It's good that you can play Mistweaver if you want to, but I do think that the tuning as it has existed up till now has made guilds feel forced to, swap somebody, even somebody who was kind of reluctant, onto Mistweaver, and it's good whenever that's not true. So probably good to deliver some small nerfs to the spec while not gutting it. I'm glad they're not gutting Mistweaver. I hope Mistweaver is still a great choice for PvE this season, and I think it still will be. Rep Pally, 3% all ability damage. Band-Aid slap onto the Rep Pally, but fair enough. Shadow Priest. So this was a change that actually was initially data mined as being a 9.2.5 change, but it looks like they're just going to pull the trigger on it for this coming reset. Which says Psychic Link now causes direct damage spells to inflict 25% of their damage on all other targets affected by your Vampiric Touch, was 15%. I believe this number went from 30 to 25 to 15, now back to 25, now that Shadow sucks, and they want to make it suck less, in AoE especially. So we'll see if this successfully makes Shadow not suck, while also making it not broken and super mandatory. The sins of Mass Dispel last season, I think, led to some more heavy-handed nerfs landing across the spec than was really necessary when Mass Dispel was the root of the problem for, like, M+. And yeah, they also have been, I think, a spec that has suffered in Raid off of Power Infusion as well, where, anytime Shadow is doing, like, good damage on the meters by itself, they're doing actually great damage because they are also giving a power infusion to somebody. And so that means for Shadow to be balanced, they have to be doing mediocre damage, which they were certainly doing pretty mediocre damage up to this point. My guild, like we used a Shadow Priest on Smolderon, we used a Windwalker on Tindral, so we've used some of these underperforming specs, and I can confirm like these buffs are certainly warranted, and would have liked to been able to use them on Fyrakk, for instance, but just it did not feel at all viable. Holy Priest, all healing increased by 3%. Prayer of Mending increased by 15%. Does not apply to PvP on either of these changes. So Holy Priest, already a spec that is quite good, but has been being outshone this season in both Mythic Plus and in Raid by Discipline. Although people do play Holy on Fyrakk in particular, it's pretty common to see one Priest swap to Holy, and in the other bosses as well, guilds can and have done it as well. Although usually the double disc is a little bit more common. And yeah, they decided, all right, we want to amp up this throughput a little bit more here on Holy. Holy, another spec that this season, Symbol of Hope has been toned down, which affects how good they are at the very highest end of Mythic rating. Although Symbol of Hope, I think, might be one of the most different buttons between a, average Hall of Fame guild versus an average AOTC guild, for instance, is like, do you know what Symbol of Hope does and how important is it to your plan, right? Because it was a hugely valuable thing that got toned down, that nerfed Holy Priest in those very highest end comps, but a button that basically doesn't mean anything in a less coordinated group. Rogue. All right, well, we've seen these DPS damage statistics here. Surely there's going to be sizable nerfs to Rogue coming across the board to all three specs, as they're all massive overperformers. Assassination. All ability and melee auto attack damage reduced by 3%. Does not apply to PvP. Oh. Okay. All right. It's time to play Rogue. If you haven't gotten the memo, Rogue is the correct class to be playing this season, and that's what you should be doing. Shaman. Ellie Shaman. Earthquake damage increased by 50%. That's a large increase to this. And I think this is a good targeting buff to Elemental. I think that pure single target is another thing to buff for Ellie. But in particular, the feeling of like, is it even worth it for me to press Earthquake is a good thing to address, because whenever that is something that shamans are thinking, it's very bad for how the spec plays. Enhancement. Elemental Warding now reduces magic damage taken by up to 6% with 2 points in it, up from 4%. This is aimed at improving enhancement survivability in all content. And I think this is fair. These talents have been power crept over the course of this expansion, where if you look at the reworked Paladin tree, the talents that were reworked in the Evoker tree, you can see these passives where it's like one point on the talent tree is giving you like 5% effective health or 10% or something. And Elemental Warding certainly fell behind those. And yeah, Enhancement was a very squishy choice this tier, except for the fact that they had Ankh, which they don't have that often. So yeah, good target here, I think. Maybe something that Ellie and Resto could also benefit from, those some increase in survivability. Resto. Torrent now increases the initial healing of Riptide by 50% more per point. Does not apply to PvP. Healing Surge healing's been increased by 12%. And Healing Stream Totem's also been increased by 12%, and none of these apply to PvP. Arsham is a spec that is actually not bad or anything, just, your Paladin is bringing an aura. Your priests are the, strongest healers on the merits, and then your monk is, your priest and your monk, yeah. Your monk's also bringing Mystic Touch, right? So, like, the high-end healing comp was... I mean, there are guilds now that are running Arshams already, and I think they'll be pretty happy about this, and I think this is a good target. Again, Healing Surge and Torrent, I think, are two great places to target the Arsham kit. This is like now the third Riptide buff that we've seen since I started beating the drum of Riptide should not feel this bad. So I'm glad to see that. I think it's probably getting pretty close now to enough on Riptide, and time to maybe start looking at the rest of the kit as well. But, Healing Stream, a nice little passive buff to that as well. It seems like a pretty good set of changes here to Arsham for me as well. Warlock. Affliction. Seed of Corruption damage increased by 10%. Soul Rat now applies to up to 4 additional targets from 3. Dark Harvest now increases crit and haste by 4% per target, up from 2.5. All right. Okay, so AF is not getting any love on single target, where they do need love. But they are getting love in AoE, where they also needed love. And now I think it's actually probably pretty good to play AF on like really AoE intensive encounters. I'm not sure there's anything in the raid where you can sacrifice what Demo does right now, though, because Demo is just is also good AoE and also good single target. But AF seems like it would be fun on Fortified Week now as well as a result of this. I don't think you can afford to bring it on Tyrannical, but you know, your Warlock can change specs on that week, but this will be fun in keys at least. And then Destro, Rain of Fire 12%, Cataclysm 25%, Immolation 25%, and Immolate damage by 10%. So mostly AoE buffs here to Destro as well, not single target buffs. Although a small single target buff here, I guess, in the form of Immolation and Immolate, but yeah, mostly buffing the AoE of that spec. I think AF is the one I'm still more excited about with these changes for like AoE situations, but both of these Warlock specs I think did need this. Demo was far and away the like only choice regardless of situation, so glad to see that happening here as well. And overall, I think this is a good set of changes. I will say, I think Rogue is getting away with some murder here. That's in their class fantasy, so maybe it's okay, but I do think that's happening here. And yeah, I guess there's some specs I would like to see. Like I'd love to see some defensive buffs to Guardian Druid and maybe some tank utility buffs to stuff like Warrior Brewmaster, but you know, that's tank things, who cares? And there are some specs here that I think they probably aren't moving enough in the right direction on, but hopefully this is, you know, there's always more to come, hopefully, with these sorts of things. This is, of course, going to be on the weekly reset of December the 18th or something, though. What is it going to be? December the 19th? So decent chance that they'll be taking a pause on the class balance over the next two resets, and we'll have this to play with for at least a little while. And I think this probably does move things in a good direction across the board. The Mage stuff in particular, this seems really good. Mage was down horrendous in Raid, at least, although, you know, the M+ side of things, it's weird. The M+ side of things is going to be Mage is going to be very good now in that, so maybe they needed to target this a little bit more, you know, a little bit more thoughtfully. We'll see. This may be the buffs where they then eventually have to revert half this stuff and move the power to other parts of the kit. Anyways, that is the end of our little look here at these patch notes. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.